Hey guys, Scott here to talk about the biggest problem in Dead by Daylight. A couple years ago, I made a video called The Second Biggest Problem in Dead by Daylight, and it talked about how people's general inability to admit mistakes makes the game seem far more imbalanced than it actually is. And to this day, I still stand by this sentiment. Being open to admitting mistakes is something that people very easily avoid just by blaming the game. And don't get me wrong, sometimes the game is bullshit, but more often than not, a seemingly impossible game that could have been very possible just had mistakes, that you didn't really notice. But whatever, that was that video. Today I want to talk about the actual biggest problem in the game. It has always been and probably always will be. And nearly every single issue of balance Dead by Daylight has can be boiled down to one simple problem, and that is bad map design. The thing is, more of the maps are balanced than not, but even the randomly generated nature of the maps can make even killer-sided maps suddenly survivor-sided, or vice versa. That being said, let's talk about the notable standouts of bad map design. Pretty much everything shown here is survivor-sided because, frankly, most maps are just survivor-sided, but some have such ridiculous setups it is a wonder how they still exist in this relatively balanced version of the game compared to, the earlier versions. First off, let's start with the Disturbed ward on Crota's Print Asylum. Playing a killer without a one-shot is an absolute nightmare on this map because at the center and accessible from nearly anywhere on the map after a speed burst from a damaging hit is probably the strongest central structure in Dead by Daylight. The main building of the Disturbed ward has two very safe windows on either side, which by themselves are very strong for extending a chase. However, Bloodlust would eventually kick in, so there are 4 safe pallets in the building as well. When I say safe pallet in this video, I refer to a pallet you must break to continue chasing as it is impossible to mind game. So, you can use these windows 3 times, get entity blocked, then run back and use one of the pallets, and then you can do the entire process 3 more times. It is absurd. Removing one of the windows and 1 or 2 of the pallets will make the structure not absurdly overpowered for survivors. Next up is Fractured Cowshed. Now, a lot of people think this map, and you think of this map, and you would assume I'm going to talk about the actual barn structure in this map, but that's, it's a strong structure, but it's been nerfed, and it isn't as ridiculous as some people might think. What is ridiculous on this map are these long loops shown here. These things can be everywhere. They are very strong and offer absolutely no mind games because you can just see over them. If the pallet is dropped early, it is an extremely safe pallet. The worst part is these insanely strong loops are the filler in between other tiles, effectively chaining half the map together if RNG is actually bad. These loops should be halved in size or guaranteed to not spawn in between other effective tiles. For example, here is the T-wall and connected to one of these loops, which is connected to another one of these loops, which leads to the shack. This is like a quarter of the entire map. There is no way all of these should spawn right next to each other like that. Wretched shop is mostly balanced except for the shop itself. The double windows are still too strong, and once you get enough Bloodlust to actually catch up, there are at least 2 pallets surrounding the structure. Very often, there are 2 jungle gyms very close as well, so the structure can be chained together to a jungle gym to eliminate Bloodlust and then ran all over again. Simply closing up one of these windows would ensure the survivor can't get as much distance to loop it multiple times without the killer catching up. Edenfield was notoriously one of the worst maps in the game, but the nerf to balanced landing has made it slightly more bearable. It has a severe fence issue I will go over when I talk about the bad maps, but the main problem with Haddonfield is this building right here dubbed the House of Pain. For killers like Huntress, it is legitimately an infinite, and I mean actually you can never ever catch the survivor, ever, if the proper windows spawn. The window at the top of the stairs here cannot ever spawn unboarded due to its proximity to the other windows next to it. So if that window spawns and then you get the other window that goes back into the stairs going downwards, for slower killers, it's legitimately an infinite. You can never catch them because you lose chase, you lose bloodlust, and they can just do it forever because the entity won't block the windows because you're not in a chase. It's ridiculous. That window that leads out of the building at the top of the stairs 100% needs to never ever be opened. The Ironworks of Misery is a mostly balanced map except for the infamous God window. The strength of this window can be made a bit more balanced by just adding like a doorway in between the window and the entrance of the building. The killer would still lose a bit of distance, but it wouldn't be nearly as ridiculous as it is now. As it is now, you basically have to bloodlust a survivor to eventually hit them on this loop. And the fact that you have to abandon a chase as soon as the survivor gets near this window should be a indication that it is way too strong. Now, Grim Pantry is also a fairly balanced map, except for the main building. The top of this building is strong by itself, with one side guaranteed to have an advantageous window vault, but the bottom with the window makes it ridiculous. Additionally, it's a gamble you can even hook a survivor if they go down on the bottom floor of the structure, assuming the basement's not there. The main bottom floor window should never, ever spawn facing the rest of the map, as it becomes accessible after a single hit from basically anywhere. If it spawned only on the backside that faces the edge of the map, at the very least you wouldn't be able to get to it from anywhere, lowering its strength. Additionally, there needs to be more hooks in this area at all times. You should never down a person and be just unable to hook them because the map is badly designed. Thompson House is notorious for chaining a large number of safe tiles together. In most Thompson House layouts, you can get a long wall, short wall pallet tile connected to a jungle gym, connected to couchery, connected to another jungle gym, connected to shack. That is just ridiculous. You can even see in this footage how easy it is to chain together very strong structures with minimal effort. For this map and any other map, there needs to be a check in place that makes sure all of these things cannot link into each other. For example, if the game detects a long wall jungle gym into the couchery, it instead replaces the long wall jungle gym with a weaker tile, like, an L wall, T wall. Good players can abuse setups like these far too easily, and Thompson House spawns setups like these almost every single time. The game, in my opinion, is the most boring map in Dead by Daylight. It's essentially just 15 to 20 safe pallets and 2 vaults, meaning once the pallets are gone, the survivors literally have 0 defenses. However, because it is so full of only safe pallets, by the time these pallets are gone, the game's usually over. I don't think this map is the most survivor-sided map in the game or anything like that. It's just painfully boring because almost none of the pallets are mind-gameable in any way. There just needs to be far less safe pallets and more vaulting opportunities to put it on par with the other maps. Bed and preschool maps are mostly okay with a few exceptions. The school fence loop is a bit too strong, often taking 2 complete circles around the school to catch up to a survivor. Shortening that fence would let the survivor still gain distance, but it would allow the killer to catch up without needing bloodlust. Badham also shares a huge issue with Haddonfield, and that is the random generation of fences. My god. Sometimes these fences can be a ludicrous length, so much so that a survivor can literally teabag a killer on the other side, and it would take the killer a full minute, we timed this, just to catch up to the survivor if they kept running around it. A minute. These fences are incredibly frustrating to deal with, and they should just never be able to be generated at such a ridiculous length. And the same goes for Haddonfield, which can spawn the exact same fences, and that's one of the other reasons Haddonfield is hated by everybody. Rancid Avatar is mostly okay, except the infamous window in the main structure. It shit just needs to never be opened ever. I don't have much else to say about the map. Just remove this window. It's ridiculous. Just stop it. Groaning Storehouse, same thing. It's mostly an okay map, except when the God window is open. It shouldn't be that this window is randomly generated to sometimes make the map ridiculously strong, and sometimes it's closed and then it's a much weaker map. It's just, the window should just never be open. It's just way too strong, and that's about it for that map. Now, Mount Ormond is, in my opinion, the worst killer map in the entire game. It has the problem of Thompson House, where half the map can be strung together in a single loop. But it also has another problem of being absolutely massive, often taking nearly 40 seconds to simply walk to the other end of the map. On top of this, it has a very large amount of pallets and a strong central structure with vaults that can spawn in extremely strong ways, with a guaranteed safe pallet on the top floor as well. The entire map is basically one giant loop. Also, scratches are just notoriously difficult to see on this map for whatever reason, and the game often spawns survivors on the polar opposite side of the map, meaning a generator could literally be finished before you can even physically get there. The map needs to be smaller and needs the Thompson House treatment of not having several strong structures chained together like that. The map needs more dead zones overall. I hate Ormond. I hate it so much. That also brings up another point. I didn't mention maps like Temple of Purgation and Red Forest because I think the main issue with these maps is not that they have a very strong structure, they're just too big. Maps need to just be smaller overall. I think Coal Tower and, like Father Campbell's Chapel and Wrecker's Yard, those maps are the perfect size for Dead by Daylight. It means killers with amazing mobility aren't necessarily as strong because the other killers are a bit more level with that. And, it shouldn't take you 40 seconds to walk across the map. Rotten Fields has the same issue too. A lot of the issues in this game would be solved if the maps were just simply smaller. Red Forest is a great example. There's nothing super strong about that map. Sometimes the central structure can spawn a very good window, but that's about it. Other than that, it's just too big. It's just too hard to get around, and that is why that map is so hated by killers. Because if you're not like Hillbilly or a killer with, some sort of amazing movement ability, it just takes too long to get places, and if survivors spread out, you can't really do much. So smaller maps are definitely needed, and the bigger maps need a change. Kind of like what Pale Rose got. Pale Rose a long time ago was basically twice the size it used to be, and it was ridiculous. They shrunk it a lot, and now it's not that bad of a map anymore. It's actually pretty decently balanced. So I think maps overall need to be a lot smaller. So those are the main problems to me. However, even the balanced maps can become impossible if RNG allows it. Which leads me to my next point. The game needs a bit less randomness. So there's currently this loop money system where basically each tile has a value associated with how strong it is for survivors, and each map adds up to the same value, so very strong setups can't just spawn everywhere. However, the system is kind of flawed because it doesn't seem to take into account proximity to other tiles. For example, here's like that Thompson House clip again. On this side of the map, we have Shack connected to a jungle gym, connected to Cow Tree, connected to a long wall jungle gym on the other side. That is just way too many strong structures chained together, and a depth survivor can get so much efficiency out of this setup that it's almost pointless to chase them in this area. Except this area is like half the map, so you have to. Now here is Rancid Avatar, and here's an example of how proximity-based value is done correctly. Here you have the Cow Tree, an extremely strong tile for survivors. Because of that, the two adjacent tiles spawn T-walls instead of jungle gyms to account for the fact that they are connected to the Cow Tree. This is just random generation, by the way. This is not how the game actually works. The two T-walls could have been jungle gyms, which would have made this setup absurd, but this shows how I think it should work. If the developers want to stick with a true random generation system instead of making, like predetermined maps, then they need to implement a better check and balance system for strong tiles being connected to each other. This is the main problem with maps that are an issue other than God Windows. However, I still think the game would be better off with a couple of variants for each map that were handcrafted. It ensures that no bullshit setups can ever occur, and it even begins to shift the game into an actually kind of acceptable tournament-level game, again, baby steps, because you can ensure both teams have the exact same setup. The reason why tournaments are such a joke in this game is you could have the same map with 10 pallets and the same map with 20 pallets, just by pure luck, and one team just might have half the resources due to RNG. That's one of the main reasons I think tournaments in this game are an absolute joke. With the number of maps in the game, there would still be over 100 different layouts overall, so it wouldn't get stale or anything, and I actually love the idea of learning the layout of a map as an additional skill veterans can learn over time, but that's just me. It reminds me of like Counter-Strike. You want to learn the maps exactly, you know exactly where you're going to run into the other side and shit like that. I think that honestly increases the skill cap even more, but that's a lot of work and probably unrealistic. Either way, the main thing to take from this video are that God windows need to not exist. There needs to be a system that accounts for the relative strength of an area when determining what tiles to spawn, so multiple strong structures cannot chain together. The thing is, almost every problem in this game can all come back to this stuff. Games go too fast because good survivors can abuse these setups too well, which makes them take too long to down, which means everyone else is just sitting there repairing gens. Touching the speed of the game via generator numbers, ruin, different objective, etc., it's just not necessary. All that needs to realistically happen is the fixing of maps, so they don't spawn absurdly strong setups, and the timing issue just solves itself due to survivors going down more frequently if the killer is good enough. Fixing the maps is a daunting task that I'm pretty positive will never actually come to fruition, but it's good to at least hope for it, right? Anyway, that is it. Put a decent amount of time into this one, more than my usual shitpost. I hope you guys enjoyed watching, and yeah, thanks for watching, and let me know what you think in the comments.